Hey, welcome everybody to the Cannabis Journal Club, where we review and interpret United States cannabis patents and scientific journals with concise overviews of complex scientific literature in an understandable and easy to consume manner to expose the knowledge hidden in the scientific literature. We do not claim any medical utility and of these government patents or scientific articles, but we do advise you to obtain your own copies of these public documents. Super excited to have you here again with us, Dr. Allen, and I'm excited to hear what you're going to share with us today. So please welcome and go ahead.
Thank you, Bubba Man. All right. So Jah over evil, God over evil, live it. So I'm Dr. David Allen. And this is Cannabis Journal Club. And this is Budley Green. And Budley Green says, herb is superb. And I think he's on to something special.
I agree.
He has an elevated consciousness. So today we're going to talk about some esoteric molecular biology. And we're going to talk about this protein. It's called vascular endothelial growth factor, VEGF. And so your first question is, why do you even need to know about this? How could this impact your life? And this is a complex subject, and I'm going to try to break it down without getting into the weeds of the science too much. And here's why you need to understand what this is: vascular endothelial growth factor. And there's two major reasons. And this protein has a lot of different functions. And I'm going to try to go through that without belaboring the science. And so I first learned about VEGF from my work as a heart surgeon and knowing about cytokine storm. And so whenever you put a person on bypass machine, it stimulates their immune system and stimulates your white cells and stuff, and can actually cause a little bit of cytokine storm. And what happens is you have these white blood cells called T killer cells, and they have a bunch of enzymes inside them. And their job is, once there's a foreign protein that's identified, their job is to go over, and once they get next to the protein, they bust open and release a whole bunch of these things called cytokines. And there's a bunch of different ones. One of the major ones is VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, but there's tumor necrosis factor and interleukins 1 and interleukin 2 and a bunch of other things. And so when these enzymes are released next to the foreign protein, their job is to digest or eat the foreign protein and kill the virus, kill the bacteria. And so when these things are released, the VEGF dissolves the foreign protein. But VEGF is a signaling protein too. And what happens is when these enzymes are released, they're a chemoattractant, and they cause other T killer cells to come into that area where the fight is. So we've identified a foreign protein. Here's where the battle is. Call all the generals in and have them come in. And what happens is, so one white cell busts open and signals all these other white cells to come in. And then they start coming in and they start busting open. And so one bust open, and then 100 bust open, and then 1,000,000 bust open. And then all of a sudden your serum is flooded with these proteolytic enzymes. They dissolve protein. So one of the functions is it's a signaling protein that causes other white cells to come into the area. And the other function is it dissolves the bad protein, but it also dissolves other proteins too. And um, so in the case of Ebola, what happens is these this protein will dissolve the glue that glues all the cells together. So the cells, you know, in a blood vessel, they're trying to prevent the white blood cells and the red blood cells from going out into the tissue. And so all the cells are glued together with this special glue called tight junctions. And vascular endothelial growth factor will actually dissolve these tight junctions. And in the case of Ebola, it dissolves them so bad. So what happens is pretty soon the cells start leaking fluid in between the cells. And as that gets bigger and bigger, then white cells and red cells start leaking out. And then that's how Ebola kills you. You bleed out because you're dissolving the tissue. And the cells can't stick together. And so the blood goes out into the interstitium. So that's bad for a lot of things, but it's good for some things. And so vascular endothelial growth factor is also a signaling protein. Whenever you have low blood oxygen, the tissues will actually secrete VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. And it's a signal, well, we're not getting enough oxygen over here. We need more blood flow over here. And so when you think about it, so any tissue is separated from the blood vessel by a whole bunch of cells in between the blood vessel and the tissue that's receiving low oxygen. And all these cells in between the vessel and the area that has low oxygen, the tissue is all glued together. And if you want to get blood flow to that area, what you got to do is you got to dissolve the glue that glues these cells together. And what happens is at first it starts leaking a little serum, and then pretty soon it starts leaking blood. So you develop channels of capillaries. So vascular endothelial growth factor causes capillary ingrowth to any area of low oxygen. And Dr. Manuel Guzman discovered this many years ago when he was working with gliomas. And there's a whole bunch of articles you can look up about VEGF. And one of the sentinel articles was inhibition of tumor angiogenesis by cannabinoids. It's by Manuel Guzman, Guzman. And so you can look at, there's a whole bunch of articles on this. So what he proved was in brain tumors, gliomas, that they, and most all tumors rely on this process of almost all tumors, solid tumors, secrete VEGF. They figured out that the tumor has actually figured out that if I secrete this VEGF, it causes blood vessels to grow into the tumor, and the tumor becomes autonomous, sucking off the life of the human. And so Manuel Guzman actually did a bunch of experiments where he proved that CBD and THC both inhibit vascular endothelial growth factor. And that's why we're talking about this on Cannabis Journal Club. And so Dr. Guzman proved that if they give CBD to these animals with glioma tumors, that it actually starves the tumor of blood flow and kills the tumor by this mechanism by inhibiting vascular endothelial growth factor. So I learned this after I quit being a heart surgeon, and I started retraining myself, and I learned about CBD inhibiting VEGF. and I was familiar with cytokine storm, and so I wrote an article about CBD in the treatment of Ebola virus, and it's based on the fact that it's proven that CBD inhibits vascular endothelial growth factor. And so the thing about viruses is people think that the virus actually kills you, but it's not the virus that kills you. It's your immune system that kills you. Your immune system becomes hyperactive, and the CBD or the THC quiets this hyperactive immune system. And so when the white cell identifies a COVID virus or Ebola virus, it releases these cytokines. And if you inhibit VEGF, then it inhibits all the trouble that happens after the cytokine storm. So you start off with one white cell, then you got a million white cells, and then you have a flood of these chemicals, these proteolytic chemicals. And what they do is they start another cascade of trouble by initiating what's called DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation. And let me explain that. Disseminated means everywhere, all over the body. Intravascular means inside the vessels. Coagulation means it clots. So DIC causes microvascular clots. The platelets clot together and block off all your end vessels. And that causes septic shock. And so CBD stops cytokine storm, limits DIC, and limits septic shock. So why should you learn about VEGF? Is because if you use THC and or CBD, it will stop the cytokine storm that's caused by a COVID virus or Ebola virus or anything else. So it's important for people to learn this esoteric information because it could save lives, because it's proven that almost all tumors secrete VEGF. And if you can inhibit VEGF, then you could inhibit the tumors stealing blood flow from you.
So that VEGF is in tumors, in cancers, it's really overexpressing itself in order to grow new blood vessels, which basically support the growth and metastasis. You've explained this to me before.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But also a key function of VEGF is it's essential for wound healing. It's important for tissue repair. It's important for embryonic development by ensuring adequate blood supply. So there are times where it's a double-edged sword. It needs that sharp edge of the sword for embryonic development. But now all of a sudden, if you get an eye disease, like a condition like diabetic retinopathy or age-related macular degeneration, that also involves excessive VEGF, which leads to abnormal blood vessel growth in the retina. It's fascinating stuff.
In addition to that, that's exactly right. There's a lot of functions, but so it has to do with tissue remodeling. That's really important, and so it has to do with cells, scar cell formation. So and adhesions and stuff, and so there may be many applications that CBD may have, or THC and CBD may have in the future. For instance, I wrote an article about CBD keeping coronary stents open. So when you put a coronary stent in an artery, what it does is it ruptures the plaque, and there's a steel cage inside it. It opens up the artery a little bit, and these stents fail by vascular endothelial proliferation. So what happens is once you open the artery with a stent, the endothelium is the inside of any artery. And so what happens is you start forming a scar over this metal stent, And the function of the scar is to prevent the blood from being exposed to the metal stent and also the cracks in the plaque. And so what happens is the endothelium starts growing and gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it causes occlusion of the stent. So it's quite possible that using cannabis will keep your stents open because of blocking of vascular endothelial growth factor. Now, in addition, since VEGF kind of controls this scar formation, what if we, a lot of people are on what's called peritoneal dialysis. And there's two ways to dialyze somebody that's in kidney failure. And one is through your veins and arteries. And the other way is to put a catheter in your belly, and they put a bunch of saline in there, and the saline absorbs the creatinine, and you drain the saline that's in your belly. It's called peritoneal dialysis. And so it's inside the peritoneum, which is anything inside your belly. And so these things fail because they end up getting fibrosis around them, and you can't put fluid back in them. And so you have to go through another surgery to cut down the adhesions that are adhesing around the peritoneal dialysis catheters. So what if you infuse coronary stents with CBD or peritoneal dialysis catheters with CBD compounds? They might prevent in-stent stenosis in the case of coronary stents, and it might prolong the usefulness of a peritoneal dialysis catheter. And it's trouble having to reoperate on somebody's belly just because these things are not, they're scarred off.
That's incredible. I mean, that's deep, Dr. Allen. That is deep. You went deep today. Anything else that we wanted to go into this in particular? I mean, it's mind-blowing. This would be so beneficial for so many different operations.
Yes. So cannabis is coming to medicine. It's slow to get here, but it's going to be here after a while. And it's all for money. And we're doing the best we can to expose this science so people can understand this complex stuff. And even a lot of this stuff is over my head when I try to read it. So don't be dismayed when you start reading about vascular endothelial growth factor. You just got to read a little bit at a time, and after a while you'll understand, because I don't think anybody knows the full story about VEGF. So it's important for people to learn about.
Wonderful. Well, what a knowledge drop here on the Cannabis Journal Club. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll definitely be back in a week or so, and we'll make a point on posting this up to the members first and then to everyone. And of course, we'll make some wonderful short videos as well and share that as well. Anything you wanted to finish with, Dr. Allen?
Job over evil.
Live it. Awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.